Welcome to the It's in Queens podcast. I'm your host, Chef Simmons, and this is the only podcast that shines a light on Queens, where every stroll down our streets and avenues is a celebration of cultures, of sounds, and of stories that are unique to our borough. This podcast is brought to you each week thanks to the Queens Economic Development Corporation and the Queens Tourism Council. Together, they work tirelessly to showcase our borough as a destination filled with amazing experiences, cultural gems, and opportunities for everyone who lives here, works here, or is visiting from near or far. With autumn finally settling in, you can feel the shift. Jackets come out, leaves crunch underfoot, and the energy in our borough finds a new rhythm. Look around. This past weekend, I was able to see folks enjoying the crisp air, heard the laughter swirling around yet another parade here in Jackson Heights. And each step and dance reflected the incredible diversity that we celebrate here every single day. There's something magical about Queens. You're in one place, but the world is right outside your door. From the colorful shops of Flushing to the lively cafes in Astoria, you really can cross continents in a single afternoon. No passport required. Our borough's every block welcomes different languages and traditions and flavors. Just walk by Travers Park near my home here in Jackson Heights and you'll hear a beautiful symphony of voices. You'll see families reading and playing and sharing moments in dozens of tongues. Watching that, I'm reminded that Queens doesn't just house diversity, it thrives on it. These days, I love pausing in Travers Park to read a book, letting the gentle hum of conversations in Spanish and Bengali and Korean and English swirl around. When you're here, a story in every language is just waiting to be found. Speaking of stories and books, it is a perfect moment to welcome this week's guest, José Martínez. José is an Emmy award-winning journalist and strategic communications specialist whose new memoir, Your English is Great But, dives into the heart of living between languages, identity, and belonging. He's a familiar face for many Queens residents from his earlier reporting days at New York One Noticias, where he covered immigrant communities and gave voice to local stories that matter. So let's jump in as José shares what inspired his journey in journalism and how his background shaped his storytelling. Here's the conversation. José Martínez, welcome to the It's in Queens podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here.
So, your English is great, but before we get to that, and we're going to talk about that, I'd love to first find out a little about your career. What inspired you to pursue journalism?
Okay, that's a long story, but I'm gonna try to tell you the shorter version. I actually wanted to be an actor. That was my dream. I was always a theater kid. I was in the theater club. I was doing all of that, and then but I love television, and I talk a lot. So then I was like, I guess my mom at that time was like, I don't think, acting is a real thing. And I was like, okay, how about like television? How do I get to like be part of television? So that's the thing. Storytelling for me was always a big deal when I was growing up, and I decided that journalism was like I knew that I had something that I could bring other people with me, and then I was like, okay, this is it. I'm gonna become a journalist.
How did your bilingual background influence your approach to storytelling?
I always say that it's not only bilingual, but it's bicultural, right? Because I'm Latino as I can be, but I can be as American as I can be, right? And so I feel like I'm connecting these worlds. Um, my upbringing kind of like allows me to live in these worlds where like I understand. Like I can be with my mom and be like, "Oh my God, we're gonna be so Colombian today," and I understand that. And like or my family in Jackson Heights, and we're like, okay, we're gonna go eat some arepas and stuff like that, and then I can go to Manhattan and be like, okay, let's be in a different world. And so like I feel like it allowed me to really understand and translate worlds, right? Not only the language, but it's just different.
Now, you mentioned your mom and you mentioned Jackson Heights, but you have strong Queens connections. I want to make sure our listeners know about that because while you don't live in Queens right now, you
Right.
spent a good amount of time in New York and in Queens.
I first of all, I love Queens. I feel like I would end up moving back because first of all, I love New York City. Like when I moved here, I just fell in love. I feel like, and it's in my book. There's a love letter to New York City, and a big part right here in Queens. I found my community. I found my people, and I think that really helped me understand what I wanted to do as an adult. And so I started covering a lot of stories in Jackson Heights. I was the reporter for a while, just covering everything. I remember just being out on, like, 74th Street and be like with my little phone holding it on, a tripod and doing my thing there. And then just, but I was always like living my dream. I was like, oh my God, could you imagine that? Like, I'm here in Queens, I'm doing this.
And that was when you worked at New York One Noticias.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's, for our listeners, what are other stations? Where have you also reported from? Because I want people to know how you've kind of, if I use the right word, hopscotched across the country.
Right. So it was crazy. I mean, I'm 36. I feel like I'm 82 because I feel like I've lived so much. But
I'm closer to 82, but go.
oh, okay. Well, happy birthday. But it was so I was actually working for Noticia Long Island in Baldwin back in the day, and then I was living in Long Island. When I moved to New York, I didn't move to the city. I moved to Long Island. So that's where like all my people are in terms of a community. And then when I was like, I gotta branch out. I gotta go to the city. I gotta start. Then I started working for New York One. But oh, I'm sorry. Right before New York One, I was working for El Diario, which is the probably the largest Hispanic or Spanish speaking newspaper in New York, and I was covering City Hall, and I was there NYPD in City Hall. So I was at City Hall,
Hmm.
and I imagined this kid there. So I met all these people, and I was like, oh my God, like they have all these like big stations here. They have all these big newspapers and all these people there, and I'm just there, kind of like in the basement office that's at City Hall. So I met wonderful people, and that was great for me because I was able to see myself beyond the Spanish language media. They were like, you got it, dude. Like, you can do it. You can just. So I started really, just talking to everybody. Went from El Diario to New York One. And I was doing just tiny things in English there. It was mostly Spanish, it was New York One Noticias. And I was working, I was covering mostly Jackson Heights, east of Elmhurst, Corona. Um, and then from there, pandemic hit, and that was kind of like my moment when I was like, I love New York, but I have to take a break. And me and my husband ended up buying a house in Pennsylvania. So I was
That's
like,
about how far from here?
so we're like 2.5 hours away from the city, which was in the beginning, it was really hard because I'm a city boy. I love the city. And I was like, all of a sudden, like, I love fashion. I love all the things that New York, you know, gives you. And all of a sudden, I'm in Pennsylvania, which is beautiful. And it's not too far because I didn't want to be like, I'm not moving, you know, more than 3 hours. That's crazy. I have to be able to come back to the city. So I went to 69 News, which is a station down there in the Allentown, Reading area. But I've always been connected. I've always been really, writing for Noticia even for years. And that station became kind of like my, I don't know, it was like an explosion. From there, ended up working for CBS News, and they were like, "Okay, we want you in California." And I was like, "California? That's so far." I thought I was gonna stay in Pennsylvania. Like I wanted to be near New York. So I ended up in California for 2 years, and now I'm back. I'm back in Pennsylvania and in New York, and I'm just happy that this is where like I have my friends and my family, and
So throughout the book, you really bare your soul.
yes.
This isn't a book where you're just writing, telling stories from each chapter of your career, but really you talk about your anxieties, you talk about your hopes, your dreams, you talk about people who've influenced you, like your abuela. At what point did you realize, given all of your experiences, I need to put this down in a book? And then we're going to get to the title.
Okay, so I think it was California, right? So I think I got to that point where I was like, oh my God, I can't even believe I have accomplished so much, right? This kid with an accent, and I know a lot of people relate to that story, which is like there are so many barriers that, come up for a person that I mean, you can speak English and you can, but there's always going to be that like, I don't know, like you don't know. And so for me was always that, right? And then all of a sudden I'm in California working for CBS News. I remember being in LA and there was a big party and all super fancy party in Hollywood. And I'm like, oh my God, like I can't even believe like this is my life. But I was struggling a lot. I was away from my family, and I realized that I had been kind of like running away from dealing with that feeling of like family and like and friends, and I was just obsessed with my career. I was like, I have to be perfect. This has to be, I have to make it somehow, And now that I was there. I mean, I was like, I'm not happy. I don't think this is happiness. And I started kind of like thinking about it and having conversations with friends, and I was like, I can't keep talking about it. I have to write it so I can really get it out of my chest, and it's not just like venting, but
Hmm.
it's really like I can read this in a few months and I can be like, okay, I know this is how you feel. So the book kind of like became that, and I started kind of writing moments that were like, happening. And then when I moved back, I took a break from television, I took a break from media, all of it, and I was like, I need some like me time. And that's when I was like, okay, I got all this stuff. There is a chapter that I actually wrote while I was here in New York, and so I started kind of putting a lot of things together, and I was like, wow, I mean, it's definitely not a biography, right? Like, I'm not telling you, I'm 36 years old, and none of that. I'm telling you what these 36 years kind of like have been for me, and navigating so many changes, right? Like identity, that I think it's a big deal for me, and understanding that like I am, who I am, and that's amazing, and that's enough. And I think a lot of people that are bicultural, bilingual, a lot of Latinos struggle with that, struggle with identity, struggle with like, am I good enough to be this or to be that, or if I do this, I'm gonna, fit into this mold. But you don't have to, right? And
Hmm.
so for me, it was like really realizing like, dude, you don't have to. You're fine. You're just the way you are.
The title, Your English is Great, but how did that evolve, the title?
So that was a phrase that somebody in media, people always want to know who that person was.
I've had a similar experience, but it was more like you sound too gay on air, so
Right.
and I don't reveal who that is. Anyway.
Yeah, same for me. I'm like, and you know what? I thank that person so much, because this is who I am today. I'm like super excited about my life, and like I'm so happy about like the things that I've accomplished. But so many things were the result of that, right? That phrase that somebody in media actually said after one of my demos, and I was so excited, like imagine, I was in my 20s, and I was like, oh my God, this is what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna be in like national television. And all of a sudden this person said that to me, and it wasn't really about the accent, it wasn't about the English, it wasn't about the pronunciation, it wasn't about that. It was about if I was able to translate to the audience, right? If people were gonna feel comfortable watching me
Hmm.
on TV. And that's what I felt immediately. I was like, oh, it wasn't even rejection. It was like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, I get what you're saying. I know that I'm not terrible. I know I'm very professional. I try to do my best, but it was definitely that. It was like that. And it became a nightmare for me. It was always there. Like, even when I was about to go live, I was always doubting. It was like, oh my God, is that how you pronounce that word? Is that how you do this? Wait, no, that's not. And it was so horrible for me, because it was like, I love doing what I do.
Hmm.
As I talk a lot, so I can do this for hours. But I was like, why am I not enjoying my job? I love this. I love going out there and talk to people, write my scripts, and be on TV and do all that. But I was suffering, and so I had to really reclaim that phrase and really be like, okay, you know what? Thank you, because yeah, my English is great, and it is great. It is good. It's good enough. It's good enough for me. It's good enough for many news directors that have hired me, for years. And so,
It's also about having that TV voice that many people think you should have.
right. And you know what? It's interesting, because that was also part of like realizing that what I was going through, it was in my mind, right? First of all, it's always like, I was doubting like that I was good enough. But people at home, viewers, were like, "Oh my God, you're great! I love you! Like, you're amazing! Like, I love your stories!" And I was like, "Why? Like, what? You know what I mean?" Like, Then I realized that it was just because I am who I am on camera, I am who I am in my life, like it was just being organic, right?
What do you hope readers take away from your book? What do you want them to experience?
I want them to feel that they're good enough. They don't have to try to fit that mold that has been created. I feel like because it took me, a few years to figure it out. I know there are other generations. Like I have my nephews and my nieces, and there's actually a story there with my nephew and in the book, and I always tell him like when he was little, I mean, he was learning Spanish.
Is that Mikey?
Mikey, yeah,
We're gonna get to Mikey in a
yeah,
moment. Okay, keep going.
but I always tell him like, it's great. It's great that you're bilingual. It's great that and he was, for a while kind of like, oh, I don't want to speak Spanish. Like I'm not. And I was like, I get it. I understand that because there is gonna be a rejection or he's probably feeling rejected. And I want readers to know that even though you have an accent, even though you weren't born here and maybe you grew up in these two cultures or whatever, you're an amazing human being. And that is enough for you to be successful. And for me, I can say it, okay, and it's just like, whatever. I got the Emmys, I got this, I got all these jobs. But ultimately, I was not happy because I wasn't happy with myself.
You do relay a story about Mikey when you return to Jackson Heights at one point in the book. Can you talk a little about that and why that resonated with you so much?
Right. That's part of the love letter to New York City. And so like I said, I mean, I love this city. I mean, I became an adult in this city, and I feel like I have all the understanding of everybody in the city until that moment. And I was having a conversation with him, and I said, "Where are your friends from?" And he said, "Well, they're from New York." And I'm like, "Yeah, but where are they really from?" And then I caught myself in the same thing that I have been trying to avoid my entire life. And he was like, they're from Queens. And I'm like, "That's right. They're from Queens." What I wanted to know what was their background, right? And their families, history, and all that. I mean, Mikey's now 15 actually, but this was years ago and he was like 8 or 9 or something. And so, but it was a beautiful moment for me to realize that, like, okay, we have done a really good job with him. Like, he doesn't see that difference. And we unfortunately grew up in an environment where there are differences. And then no matter what you do, they're ingrained right there. And you had to fight.
So the book, and I'm going to get back to Jackson Heights because I know you like talking about it.
Oh, I love
But
Jackson.
the book touches on grief, identity, living between languages. What type of reaction have you gotten from readers? What resonated with them most since the book's release?
I'm very surprised that people, Latinos and, people with, an accent or something, they feel connected. But I've also gotten like people that have been struggling with other things. Somehow the phrase "your English is great," but became like you mentioned, oh, you sound too gay, right?
Hmm.
Or you look different. And there's always going to be something that somebody in your life have mentioned that would, if you don't fight against that, it's gonna break you forever. And I know people that, oh, I can't get over this. This person said this to me, and I'm like, how do you really break that like cycle, right? And I think that like every time we present the book, people come and then they're like, oh, I remember like, this reminds me of something, and this reminds me when somebody said this to me, and I'm like, right, because that's the whole point. I didn't want the book to be only about language or Latinos or anything like that. I wanted the book to be about like, yeah, you are a person, you are one person when you're in your 20s, and then when you get to your 30s, you're like, oh my goodness, like I am like, who was that, right? And you start analyzing that, and I think everybody had that experience.
And I know I want to get to Jackson Heights because we're going to wrap up in a few moments. But before I forget that, I think it's get to that. I think it's important that what comes across is that you hope through the book to create spaces for underrepresented voices. Talk a little about that.
Yeah, I feel like we have these narrow views of the world where like only certain people could write books or only certain people are allowed to give their opinions. No, we're in a social media world where everybody's saying stuff, but if you really stop and think, allowing people, minorities, and not only race or anything like that, but anybody that can be able to express how they feel. I do this just for example when I went to California, and right before that I was like, oh my god, I'm going to go to, like, this is the mecca for Latinos. I mean, if there are many Latinos in New York City, imagine in California. No, I got there, and then in the newsroom there was like one. I'm in San Francisco, and I'm like, okay, where are the gays in this newsroom? Oh, two. Oh, okay. So there is no diversity anywhere if you think about it. So that really translates into the stories that we share. So what I did, at that time was like, I'm gonna go to the Mission District, which is mostly Latinos, and I'm gonna get somebody that doesn't speak English, and I'm gonna translate, because that is a whole different voice that none of these reporters were gonna be able to get, right? Because they were like, "Oh, you don't speak English? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna talk to you." So I was like, "I'm actually gonna talk to you. So tell me." "Oh, I don't speak English." "Tell me. I can do it in Spanish. I'll do the translation." So that's really like what my life is about. I feel like that's my mission. Is like, how do I bring these people to the front of screens for them to be able to be heard?
So I'm really glad that we're doing the interview in Jackson Heights when you've returned for this weekend. Whenever you return to this area, this neighborhood, what do you like to do? Like, what do you miss most about Queens?
Oh my God, I miss the arepas. Um, I miss, I think there is a family vibe here. There is something about Jackson Heights that it makes me go back years, like in time. Like, and I remember like being here with my nephew when he was little. Now they moved to Florida, like many people do. And it's just so different, to see that. But I love that. I love that I come back here, and I feel like, oh my goodness, it's like 2015 again. Like, it's like, regardless if I went to California for years, and the audience is so amazing. The people, the same people in the same restaurants, they're right there, and the same type of conversations, and I feel at home when I come back.
And for any of our listeners who want to get a copy of your English is great, but where should they go?
Okay, so they can go to the website. It's VozNYC.com/shop. The book is right there, but it's also on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's everywhere. They just Google it.
And
Your English is
you also have a website.
Yes, so josemartineznews.com. The book is right there too. I have a newsletter that I started kind of like um working on Substack too, to kind of share my views in the world and what's going on. And yeah, so the book is everywhere, and we are going to keep working on presenting the book. Next event is going to be in Long Island. So I'm excited that people can enjoy that.
Jose Martinez, thank you for appearing here on the It's in Queens podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
If you'd like to read Your English is Great, but check out Jose's website at josemartineznews.com. And you'll find signed copies at voznyc.com/shop. Follow him on Instagram at Jose Martinez News for book updates and new essays. Now that fall air calls us outside these days, it is the perfect time to explore every corner of Queens. So whether you're attending a cultural festival, joining a historical walking tour, or just walking around to get a cup of the best coffee and see some wonderful murals, let autumn's inspiration lead you to something new in our borough. So up next, it is time for Rob Mackay's Picks. Rob is a writer, a historian, and director of tourism at the Queens Tourism Council, and he brings incredible recommendations here each week for where to explore, what to photograph, and how to savor Queens right now. Let's hear his advice this week.
Jeff, I know you're a romantic little devil, So I think you would love what's coming up this weekend because it truly is a story of how love conquers all. Capuli Mexican Dance Company, which you probably have heard of, they're actually based in Queens. They're doing their signature Day of the Dead performance at Queens Theater this weekend, 4 times actually, from Friday to Sunday. And it's Capuli, so the costumes are going to be awesome. The music and the dancing is going to be awesome. And the actual story it takes place in a small town in southern Mexico where the beautiful Lupita is in love with the handsome Raul. The only problem is that Lupita's mother has arranged a marriage for Lupita and this other guy, the evil Max Emiliano, who's also the son of the town's richest family. And Lupita fights her mother and fights the rich family for love and ends up marrying Raul in a beautiful dance sequence. And then Maximilian, of course, to save his honor, has to challenge Raul to a duel. And that's probably enough to tell you. This time, of course, then it involves it's the Day of the Dead, so they go to the land of the dead, Mixtlan, and it goes on and on and on. But you could just imagine how wonderful the fantasy sequences are with great costumes and dancing. So I highly recommend that and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
And while you're out and about, why not snap some photos of our borough's iconic street art, or the golden autumn trees, or architectural gems? You're going to find all this across our borough. And if you take some photos and you share any shots, use the hashtag #It'sInQueens, because then you could become our photo of the week. There's no limit to what you'll discover when you're looking around with a curious lens. And remember, the place to go to discover and explore everything that's on the horizon here in Queens is very easy to remember. It's at the It's in Queens website at it'sinqueens.com. And by the way, if you're interested in more business-related news, how to help your business or friends or family members, well then drop by the Queens Economic Development Corporation's website at queensny.org. And when you're there, or when you visit the It's in Queens website, take a moment and sign up for their newsletters. So thank you so much for tuning in. The heart of Queens always beats stronger together. I'll see you out on the borough streets, so stay curious, keep exploring, and snap those autumn photos. I'm your host, Jeff Simmons, and that's it for this week's It's in Queens podcast.